Delphi is a small town in the state of Indiana, about 20 miles northeast of Lafayette. Located along the Wabash River, Delphi is roughly halfway between Indianapolis and Chicago, to give you a general idea of where it's located. While Delphi has an incredibly small population, less than 3,000 people call Delphi home. Roughly 250,000 people live in the region defined as the Lafayette Metropolitan Statistical Area. So, while Delphi has a reputation for being a small town, you know, the kind where everybody knows everybody, that whole thing, it is really just part of a larger grid, connected to dozens of other cities and towns. Up until recently, Delphi, Indiana was just a blip on the map, a stopgap town that people would occasionally dip into because of its proximity to other cities. Or, on the rare occasion, its scenic parks would attract some day trippers from out of the region, primarily hikers and other outdoorsmen. Since 2017, though, Delphi has become synonymous with a violent incident that unfolded within it. A double murder that ensnared two of the most vulnerable among us, children. This was the type of crime that had never been seen before in Carroll County, and despite police releasing several details of this supposed killer to the public, he has managed to escape identification and prosecution in the years since. This is the story of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. Welcome to Unresolved. I am your host, Micheal Whelan. If this is your first time listening to Unresolved, I would like to thank you for giving it a chance. While I usually cover smaller, underreported stories, this is the 100th episode of Unresolved, and I decided to take on something a little more high profile. I only hope I do a good job telling this story. If you like what you hear and would like to help support this show, you can head to the podcast website, unresolved.me, where you could find links to the podcast store or the Unresolved Patreon page. Both links are located at the top of the page, and for those of you that do help support this venture of mine, thank you so much. The rest of you, thank you for listening. Word of mouth is always appreciated, and you just listening is a wonder. I can't thank you all enough. To learn more about this show, visit the aforementioned website, unresolved.me, or listen through to the close of this episode. But now, without any further ado, here is the story of the Delphi Murders. Liberty Rosalind German was born on December 27, 2002, to Derek German and Carrie Timmons. She would have 4 sisters, Kelsey, Glenna, Alexis, and Hayden, and would become incredibly close with her grandparents, Mike and Betty Patty, who were her primary guardians. As a child, Liberty loved baking, painting, and other crafts, and was described as an incredibly bright young girl that earned good grades and was constantly battling to be the best student in each of her classes. She also had a love of the outdoors and athletics, and was active in volleyball, softball, soccer, and swimming. Liberty was attending Delphi Community Middle School, and was in the 8th grade. She had just recently celebrated her 14th birthday ahead of her best friend, Abby, whom she had become close with after playing on the same 7th grade volleyball team. In the roughly year and a half since, the two had become inseparable, and were both hoping to play on the same softball team later in the season. Another friend of Liberty's named Erica Gibson, who always knew Liberty by her nickname, Libby, recalled her as being a quote-unquote band geek who is very outgoing and incredibly smart. She says that Libby was huge on science, and had been inspired to become a science teacher while attending Delphi Community Middle School. She had even started taking some advanced science classes over in Lafayette, more specifically at Purdue University. According to her friend Erica, Libby was also a supportive and loving friend, who was always there to provide words of wisdom or a shoulder to cry on for anyone that needed either. Abigail Joyce Williams was born on June 23, 2003, to her mother Anna Williams. Whoever her father was, he did not play an active role in her life, and Abigail, nicknamed Abby for short, had no other siblings. In addition to having a strong bond with her mother, Anna, she was also incredibly close with her grandparents, Eric and Diane Erskine, whom she nicknamed Pawpaw and Meemaw, respectively, as well as her aunts, uncles, cousins, and other grandfather, Cliff. Abby loved being outdoors. In particular, she loved riding ATVs while on camping trips with her family in Michigan. She also loved other activities that engaged her creatively. In addition to reading constantly, she also loved photography, art, and drawing. Abby was known as a person that was hard to crack, at least at first. But once she opened up to you, she had a reputation for being fiercely loyal and loving, as well as being incredibly rambunctious. A family friend recalled about Abby, quote, "She had the best personality. She was seriously so fearless and loving, like she loved. Like she had to warm up to you at first, but she was so kind." Abby also attended Delphi Community Middle School and was in the same grade as Liberty, 8th grade. Erica Gibson, a fellow student that was friends with both Libby and Abby, said that Abby was, quote, "quiet in front of people, but she was not quiet at all in front of our group of friends." In addition to playing saxophone in the school band, Abby also played on the volleyball team. As she approached her 14th birthday, Abigail was looking forward to high school and all of the adventures that would come with it, which she was planning to face alongside her best friend, Libby. February 13th, 2017 was the day before Valentine's Day. It was a Monday, and also a planned snow day. A day in the middle of winter set aside for the school schedule, just in case. If you're unfamiliar, a planned snow day is just a day set aside at the beginning of the school year to help keep the schedule from overflowing into the summer. Since there had been no major closures up to that point, it just became a day off for the students and faculty. In the year leading up to this point, Abby and Libby had become incredibly close, as had their families. The two girls had spent the night together prior to this day off, and earlier in the day, made the impromptu decision to go hiking in an area that Libby was familiar with. It was unusually warm for a winter day, so they wanted to make the best of it and spend a few hours outside. At around 1:45 that afternoon, Abby and Libby were dropped off at a trailhead by Kelsey, Libby's older sister. The entrance to the trail, known as Freedom Bridge, was located along County Road West 300 North, near the Hoosier Heartland Highway, a wooded area a couple of miles away from downtown Delphi. The trail itself, which is one of Delphi's historic trails, runs along an old abandoned railroad track. Eventually, this path leads to an old railroad bridge, which overlooks the body of water named Deer Creek. This bridge, aptly named the Monon High Bridge, lives up to its namesake. It's roughly 60 feet tall, making it the second highest bridge in all of Indiana. It's also incredibly old, having been built in the 1890s, and includes many gaps between the ties, which can make walking along the bridge either a thrilling or a scary experience. It can also be hard to walk quickly, as your eyes are forced down to the bridge itself, as you look for any footholds and hope to avoid tripping. After all, more than 50 feet above the creek, this is the last place you would want to trip. Roughly half an hour after being dropped off at the trailhead, the two girls posted a couple of pictures to Snapchat. One picture was a black and white photo of the bridge itself, while another, which would be widely circulated just hours later, featured Abby crossing the bridge. This would be the girls' last known location. About an hour after these photos were posted to Snapchat, sometime after 3 p.m., Libby's father, Derek, arrived at their predetermined pickup location. He had arranged to pick up the girls, and a few minutes before arriving, tried calling Libby's cell phone to let her know he was almost there. Libby would not answer her phone, and for several minutes after Derek got to the pickup spot, the girls would fail to show up. Derek continued calling Libby's cell phone, but there was no answer. He eventually got out of his car and started walking the trail. As he did, he passed an older gentleman, who was in his mid to late 70s, who was wearing a flannel shirt and walking along the trail. Derek asked this man if he had seen the girls, and the older man said that he had not. For the record, That man is not suspected of any wrongdoing. He just happened to be walking along the trail that Monday afternoon. Eventually, a brief search would ensue, with Derek and some other family members looking for the two girls along the trail. At around 5:30 p.m., the decision was made to report the girls as missing. After failing to make it to the pickup location, family members of Abby and Libby began to canvass the area looking for them. At around 5:30 p.m., the girls were officially reported missing to the Carroll County Sheriff's Department, who immediately sent out officials to begin looking for them. The search for the two girls, which set off early that evening, was conducted by the aforementioned Sheriff's Department, who had help from members of the Delphi Police Department, the Delphi Fire Department, and the Department of Natural Resources. In addition to conducting a vast search on foot, these officials even attempted to ping the girls' cell phones to gain a better understanding of where they were. Unfortunately, it was believed that their phones were dead or turned off, as their phones had stopped pinging earlier in the day. The search lasted for several hours, expanding out from the girls' last known location, the Monon High Bridge they posted photos of on Snapchat. But the encroaching darkness was making the terrain nearly impossible to traverse, and with the temperatures beginning to drop below freezing, the search was called off shortly before midnight. At the time the search was called off, police did not suspect foul play, at least not immediately. The Carroll County Sheriff's Department did not believe that the girls were in immediate danger, and did not think that further efforts, such as issuing an Amber Alert, would be necessary. The biggest threat, they considered, was the elements. Police believed that the girls were still alive, and had just decided to travel to a friend's house without telling their family, a belief that seemed to be based upon their age and very little else. Unfortunately, this belief would be proven completely wrong a little more than 12 hours later. The search for Abby and Libby picked up again the following morning, on Tuesday, February 14th. The search crews gathered around the Monon High Bridge at around 10 a.m., hoping to expand outwards in separate directions and cover a good plot of land during daylight. This included both canine units and specialized dive teams, who began to search in and around local bodies of water. This search only lasted a couple of hours, however, as a discovery was made by the Delphi Fire Department shortly after noon. At around 12:45 p.m., officials with the fire department had followed a set of footprints to a location roughly 50 feet away from the north bank of Deer Creek, roughly half a mile east of the Monon High Bridge. The Delphi fire chief reported the discovery as quote-unquote not good, and indicated that it was the missing girls' bodies. Police would not disclose any details about this discovery, at least not immediately. The only detail that became public knowledge was that this discovery was made on a plot of land belonging to a local man named Ronald Logan, who police believe did not have anything to do with this crime. It was just a large plot of wooded land along Deer Creek, and police would withhold almost all of their information about this discovery. Later that afternoon, a brief press conference was held with officials from the Delphi Police Department, the Carroll County Sheriff's Department, and Indiana State Police, who were all speaking to the media. As you'll hear, they were very vague about any specific details, and seemed unwilling to admit that the discovery pertained to the two missing girls.
Basically, we're going to make this, it's going to be short and sweet. We don't have that much at this point in time. Basically, what we've got, we have found two bodies. Is that the Sugar Creek?
Deer Creek.
Deer Creek, sorry. In Deer Creek, about a mile east of town. We are investigating this as a crime scene. We suspect foul play. We have not made positive identification of the two bodies, so we're not going to be releasing any information on them at this point in time. We've got the Indiana State Police is assisting the Carroll County Sheriff's Department and the Delphi City Police Department in the investigation here. We also have the FBI Crime Scene Investigation Group here out of Indianapolis. And one thing the family asked us to do is to thank all the communities around Delphi and the people here in Delphi for assisting in attempting to locate these the two young children that were missing earlier. They just wanted to say thank you to those people, and thank you They were just wanted to express their gratitude toward the hard work that was done in helping search for these children.
Has the search been called off for these two teenagers?
Not officially, because we have not positively identified the bodies at this point in time.
Do you have people still searching the woods and creeks and fields?
There's still people out looking, but it has been scaled back. I mean, just put it that way.
Are the bodies of the two individuals recovered, are those of young female children?
I'm not at liberty to give that information out as of this time.
Who found them?
I'm not going to say at this point in time.
Why do you believe that there was foul play?
Just the way the bodies were found. That's about all I can say at this point in time.
Were they in the water?
They were on the edge of the water, from what I understand. That's about the best I can tell you.
Any outside injuries?
I'm not going to make a comment on that at this time.
What time were they found?
That I'm not sure. 12:15?
12:15.
About 12:15 this afternoon.
Are there any either suspects or persons of interest being questioned at this time?
We have not gotten that far into the investigation, so I cannot comment one way or the other.
Sheriff, you are from this community. Talk about the toll this search and this apparent recovery has taken on your county.
It's been a long several hours. It's played tremendously on the emotions of the community, but the positive is the outreach of love and support for the families involved. And I think that's been fantastic. It speaks highly of our community.
You've talked to the families. There's been no identification, but we could hear that this was a sad meeting you had.
There is some sadness, yes.
How long do you think it's going to take, of what you know so far, how long do you think it's going to take to positively identify these
I can't speak for the coroner. He's the one that will take care of that part. That's not something I can give you that information at this point in time.
How far down was it from the bridge? Downstream?
Probably more than a mile, or less than a mile, rather.
I'm going to say somewhere between half and 3/4 of a mile. I'm guessing. The road curves back in there, so it's really hard to tell as the crow flies how far it is, but I'm going to guess about a half to 3/4 of a mile back there.
It wasn't that far from where the search started. You mentioned hours of searching, hundreds of people. So were they not in plain sight in that area, that it would have taken a long time for you guys to find them?
We really don't want to comment on that at this point in time.
Are there any
We don't really want to put out too much information at this point in time. Something I will do, if you follow me on Twitter, I'm going to probably put tweets out approximately every hour on updates. It may be as much as that I'm just going to say we have nothing new at this time, but I will try to do that for at least the next 4 to 6 hours.
How do you suspect, do you presume that these are the two people you were looking for?
I really can't comment on that at this point in time.
Were there any visible injuries or other signs of trauma to the bodies that were discovered?
We're not going to make any comment on that either. I know we're not giving you much. I understand that, but I mean we're at the baby stages of this case. At this point in time, I cannot release really much more information. As soon as I can, I will be more than happy to put stuff out.
The following day, February 15th, 2017, police would confirm that the bodies found the day prior were indeed Liberty, German and Abigail Williams. This followed an autopsy in Terre Haute, Indiana, but the results from that autopsy would be immediately sealed. Despite the police announcing that the girls had been murdered, they would refuse to release any specific details, such as the cause or manner of death. Later that evening, police would release a photo of a man they wanted to speak to. The man was someone who had been walking on the same trail the victims were on, In fact, the photo that was released showed him walking along the same stretch of bridge that the two girls had photographed and uploaded to Snapchat shortly before their deaths. The image of this man was cropped from a much larger image, hence him being a vague, heavily pixelated figure that is hard to make out. However, based on this image, we can make out several of this individual's details. He is a regular Joe-looking character, perhaps somewhat heavyset, who was wearing blue jeans, a navy blue colored jacket, a hoodie underneath the jacket, and perhaps a paperboy looking hat. He was photographed walking with his head down and his hands in his pockets. Police did not officially name this man a suspect, just a quote-unquote person of interest that they would like to speak to. However, that would change several days later, on February 19th, when he was officially named the primary suspect in this investigation. Following the release of this image, authorities lauded Liberty German, one of the two victims, who had managed to capture not only an image of this man before her death, but also video and audio. Despite being incredibly young, Libby had had the wherewithal to turn on her phone's camera and record this individual as he approached the two girls, not knowing if he would do them any harm, but that he might. It was unknown if police had recovered Libby's phone at the crime scene, or if the files were taken directly from the cloud backup her phone was linked to. But her quick thinking had given police their first real lead in this case. In fact, if this case ever does get solved, many credit 14-year-old Libby German for preemptively helping solve her own murder. Sergeant Tony Slocum of the Indiana State Police stated, quote, "That young lady is a hero, that is no doubt. To have enough presence of mind to activate the video system on her cell phone to record what we believe is criminal behavior about to occur. There is no doubt in our mind that she is a hero." The likely culprit of this heinous crime had been captured on Libby German's cell phone, not only in an image, but both audio and video. The video, which has not been released to the public, shows this strange man walking towards the two girls, who were actively filming him. The image that was widely circulated just days after the girl's death was taken from this video. A small snippet, perhaps, but enough to capture this man's overall appearance. The audio, which was taken from this video clip, reveals the man telling the girls, quote, "down the hill. I'll let you hear it for yourself."
Down the hill. Down the hill. Down the hill. Down the hill.
It is widely believed that this audio clip was the man telling the girls to go down the hill on the southeast side of the bridge, where he had likely followed and then cornered them. I'll play the audio clip again.
Down the hill. Down the hill. Down the hill. Down the hill.
It is believed that Libby had recorded a much longer video segment, which the audio and image came from, and many think that the audio was recorded with the phone concealed, perhaps in Libby's pocket or something like that. It is possible that this longer segment of video includes either audio or video of the crime itself being carried out, which is why investigators are hesitant to release many more details about what was recorded on Libby's cell phone. They want to protect not only the investigation, but, God willing, any subsequent trial. However, police have revealed details about this alleged culprit, who is believed to be a white male who stands somewhere between 5'6" and 5'10", weighs somewhere between 180 and 220 pounds, with reddish-brown hair and an unknown eye color. His age is undetermined, with him originally believed to be middle-aged, but that would evolve over the next couple of years. Investigators now believe he is anywhere between 18 and 40 years old, with a potentially youthful appearance. This unknown subject, who has been nicknamed Bridge Guy, or BG, in various online circles, was originally named a person of interest by police, who simply wanted to speak to him. But days later, police would amend that, and label him a suspect in the murder, as well as the most likely culprit. Officials with the Indiana State Police would announce, quote, "During the course of the investigation, preliminary evidence has led investigators to believe the person, in the distributed photo, is suspected of having participated in the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German." A composite image of this man was released to the public months later, in June of 2017. Police would claim that this sketch was the result of information called into the tip line. as well as additional information obtained through follow-up investigations. This is the sketch that would be widely circulated in the aftermath of the crime, but as we'll soon learn, this may not have been totally accurate, or even helpful. The investigation, which was a joint effort between Indiana State Police and the Carroll County Sheriff's Department, began looking over the stories of those close to the victims. This included family members and friends, those that are typically looked into at the onset of any investigation. In the meantime, other investigators began to look at registered sex offenders in the region, which in itself is not an indication that any sexual crimes took place. Rather, this is just the natural starting point for any similar investigation. Police also looked to obtain security footage from any establishments nearby, using them to identify people that had been near the crime scene on the day in question. It is also believed that cell phone records were looked over in an attempt to find any cell phones that had pinged near the two girls in the time frame of their death. Sergeant Kim Riley of the Indiana State Police stated, quote, "We are checking their cell phones, we're checking their social media places, Twitter, Facebook, and that, to see if there's some type of connection there. We are looking at every possible option. Everybody is a suspect." The case drew attention to Delphi from all over the country, with celebrities like Nancy Grace, Dr. Oz, and Dr. Phil taking an interest in the story. Each covered the case on their programs in 2017, bringing a spotlight to this little-known region. In addition, the FBI began utilizing roughly 6,000 electronic billboards across 46 states to spread images of the victims and the alleged culprit. Over the next several weeks, police would receive literally thousands of tips. It is estimated that by June of 2017, roughly 4 months later, police had received roughly 18,000 tips from the public. Because of this influx of information, authorities had to recruit the help of the FBI and Homeland Security, who helped set up a specialized communications dish to handle the overwhelming number of calls being received. Many of these tips were then forwarded to FBI call centers, who helped handling the overflow of information. In addition to all of this positive publicity, which was helping investigators receive new tips and leads pretty much every hour on the day, there was also an influx of false confessions and extraneous theories. In addition to a number of useless leads being called in to officials, it is believed that police had to deal with a number of individuals confessing to the murders but not knowing any of the intimate details of the crime itself. This would only make their job more difficult in the months to come, as the case began to look tougher to crack with each passing day. On February 22nd, 2017, roughly 1 week after the murder of the two girls and the discovery of their bodies, police officials from throughout the region held a joint press conference, which was broadcasted through the region, and later, the nation. At times, these police officials, lifelong public servants who dedicated their lives to law enforcement, struggled to speak through clearly raw emotions.
Obviously, the reason we are here today is to give out information in the double homicide of Liberty German and Abigail Williams. On February 13th, Abigail Williams, 13, Liberty German, 14, went on a hike at the Delphi Historic Trails. On February 13th, they were reported missing later in the afternoon when they failed to return to a pickup location as a family member returned to pick them up from their hike. After organized searches on February 14th, one of those search parties unfortunately found the bodies of the two teens. Evidence in this case has led investigators to believe this is a double homicide, and that's what we're investigating at this time. Also shown in front of me is an enlarged depiction of a person believed to be the suspect in this case. We are actively looking for this person. We believe this person is our suspect. And we would like any information, regardless of how small or minute you might believe that information to be. It might be the one piece of a very large puzzle that helps us get this person in custody. So please call our tip line, 844-459-5786. And again, I would like, as we go through this press conference, to remind the media there's going to be information that is germane to our investigation that we're not going to release today. But at the end of the press conference, we will have time for question and answers. So as we go through our speakers, I ask you to please hold your questions to the end of the press conference. So at this time, I would like to invite Indiana State Police Superintendent Douglas Carter to the podium.
Words tend to escape during these periods of time, so I've only had a couple of other situations in my lifetime. I'm able to stand before you and say that. Why Libby? Why Ed? Why Delphi? Why Carroll County? Why the region? Why the state? Why even in the nation? I say that because this is a classic example, a clear example that evil lives amongst us. To the family, to the community, the region, the state, as a leader of the Indiana State Police, I say, I am so very sorry. Resources. It's unlikely that any of you will ever see, nor will we ever see or experience again, the level of resources that are attached to this investigation. To the media. My gosh, all I can say is just give you my sincere thanks. See, this isn't like TV. There's a perception that this can be solved very quickly. Anything that we do can be solved very quickly, but this is a testament that it can't, and we need you. We've needed you since last week, we need you today, we need you tomorrow. And likely we'll need the media all across this nation. So from a simple guy like me to you, I say thank you. To the people dressed funny like me and those that represent the law enforcement profession, please understand we're human beings just like you. I stand anywhere in the nation with people standing behind me. And I would suggest to you that every time something like this happens, a little piece of us dies as well. I also want you to understand how committed we are as a collective one. As a collective one, and we will continue. This has been briefed all the way up to the director of the FBI, Director Comey, and Greg Mass is going to talk a little bit about that. I've had an opportunity to speak to my boss, Governor Eric Krokum, a couple different times about this situation. And every time I do, I see this look that comes over his face, just like yours and his communities. And that's the unfortunate experience of experiencing evil. We're not stopping. The poster in front of you. Someone knows who this individual is. Someone knows who this individual is. Is it a family member? Is it a neighbor? Is it an acquaintance? Is it an associate? Or maybe that one guy that lives over at that one place that just kind of not right. Maybe it's his jeans. Maybe it's his jacket or his sweatshirt. Maybe it's his shirt tail. Maybe it's his posture. Maybe it's the right hand in his pocket. You see, even with technology, we need human intelligence. In other words, we need you. I'm not suggesting that science, that everything that we can do as science has been done, because we are just getting started. Abby and Libby deserve us. They deserve every single one of us, and not just the people standing up here on the stage that have given so much of their lives to not just this, but to this profession, but each and every one of you. Each and every person listening watching or seeing this in some form, we need you. Libby and Abby need you. Please do not rationalize tips away. Rationalize what you think that might not be important away. By thinking he would never do that to another human being. Or think, what I know doesn't matter. Let folks like the people that are standing behind me with such incredible passion and commitment and dedication to this profession make that determination. Tips are anonymous. Some might not want to talk about it because they don't want to get involved. Because they know the individual. Again, he may be a family member. Probably has family. No one will ever know. No one will ever know. There's not an agency on the planet better than helping us facilitate this than the FBI. And they're as entrenched in this as anybody. No one will know. As poor as this picture is, somebody knows. And if you're watching, we'll find you. Who's next? I hate to ask you that question. I'd give my life to not have to. But I know you've asked yourself that very question. We must recognize it. You see, we're all the same. We're all human beings. We must keep our resolve for Libby and Abby, for this community, and frankly, to ensure that good trumps evil. And it will.
That will be the end of our press conference. As far as speakers at this time, we will entertain questions.
Can you tell us again what is exactly said on that clip?
For the assistant agent, special agent, Nurse and I, Crime Watch Daily, we're wondering, do you have any indication to believe that this suspect in these images is local or was passing through? Do you have any indication as to where he might be from, if he's still in this area or not?
One with both. Okay, we'll both. Joint partnership.
Is there any specific information that says the person is local or from far away? No. Could this be a stranger crime? That's a possibility. Could this be somebody that knew that the girls were going to be there at that time? That's a possibility. Nothing is off the table.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The only thing I would add is where the FBI can come involved, and if it does lead interstate or multi-jurisdictionally, we have that capability to stretch it further outside of this immediate community across the state or across state lines.
Based upon they communicated online with this individual?
Let's go on. I'll let you do your follow-up, then I'll come to you. What's your follow-up? Go ahead and do your follow-up.
How long after Liberty posted to social media did this crime happen? Did the murders happen immediately after, or was there time for someone to see them on social media and then meet them on that trail?
As a special, we know that there are going to be lots of questions that we specifically cannot answer, because there are things that we do not want to tip our hand to the person responsible for this. That kind of information we're keeping close to ourselves. Is it reasonable to think that that's an area? One of two things happened. That was a chance encounter. That's possible. Don't think it's likely, but it's possible. Or that person knew that they were going to be there. That's possible as well. Those are things that we're looking into. Question over here.
Online communication with this individual, has there been any evidence of that from the girls with this person?
Similar to what I just said, there's specific pieces of information that we're not discussing. The best example that I can give you is if somebody is a victim of a burglary and then they're murdered, everybody wants to know how they were murdered. If we go into the details and we say they were stabbed twice in the back and they were shot in the head, then everybody hears that. And then when we get tips, people tell us that, and the tip is useless. We're keeping information that will only be known by the person or by who that person told. And when that's shared with us, it will set off the alarm bells and we'll know.
Captain, based upon what you have and other investigators have seen of this crime, do you believe this individual has killed before, and what makes you believe he will do it again?
Great. I'll let Agent Massa address that.
There has been no indication right now that this is part of a serial murder, if that's what your question is. So as of the facts that we have collected at this point in time, we have not tied it to any other known homicides.
Captain, you played 3 words. Do you have an extensive volume of video and audio that you're not sharing yet? I mean, is there more?
We have other information that we're not sharing, and specific to your question, Raphael, keep in mind that the likeliness and the possibility of more than one person. We're not saying that the voice that you heard is the same as this person here. This is all very complicated, very involved, and as much as we would like to tell you everything, more importantly, we want to solve the crime.
Can you clarify those, sir? You just said that is not the voice of the person in that picture. Just clarify that statement.
Correct. That could be or could not be.
So where's the audio from them, sir? Just so we are.
The audio is also from Liberty's phone.
But you're not sure.
She had the presence of mind to have the phone on and to capture video as well as audio.
Can you talk about how long that video clip is, even if you can't share it?
No, I can't.
And to be clear, is that a loop that you're playing several times?
That is a loop that we played 4 times for purposes for you to hear it.
The cell phones were found, or one cell phone. Did the suspect or suspects leave anything that you can talk about at the scene?
No, there's nothing I can speak to about the scene investigation and collection of evidence.
That person, did that photo come from one of the girls' cell phones in that reporting?
Yes, thank you for asking that, Paris. To clarify, the image that you're looking at here came from Liberty's phone.
So you believe this is the...
Holding some that we could see how he walks. Is there any more of this image of this constable, of this suspect?
There's nothing that we are prepared to release at this time.
Can you, I guess, reconcile? This is believed to be the main suspect. The voice is believed to be a suspect. Can you say you believe that's the voice of that man in that photo?
No, I can't say that because we weren't there. We know that voice was captured from her cell phone. We know this image was captured from her cell phone. Keep in mind, all of you are in the television business. What do you see out of the TV? You see this. You don't see what's over here. You don't see what's over here. So there's lots more that we're looking at.
Captain, how was it determined that he was the main suspect? Can you go into detail on that?
As I indicated before, the reason we believe this is a suspect is based on the totality of the evidence that we've gathered thus far. That has led us to believe this is the person that at least participated in the murders of Liberty, German and Abigail Williams.
The picture that you guys have, as we've mentioned before, it seems like it's enhanced, and we talked about that a little bit yesterday. I mean, how enhanced is this picture? Did it come from a Snapchat photo that she had saved? Is he in the background corner? I mean, how far away was he from a picture that she might have just snapped on that bridge?
Now, we're not going to release that part of the information, but it did come from her phone, which entails that even though we enhanced it, it's the best we have. That's the image we're giving. And just because you and I do not recognize that photo, there, as indicated earlier, a person that works with what appears to be a male white in that photo might recognize him. Again, a family member might recognize that. Unfortunately, it's the best we have, and that's what we're going to go with at this time. If we decide to go other routes later, we'll let you know.
Just to clarify one point here, do you believe that, based on the evidence you guys have, that Libby turned her cell phone on and started recording specifically because this person seemed suspicious or was creeping her out in some way? And if so, what's your reaction to a 14-year-old having the presence of mind to do that?
This young lady's a hero, there's no doubt. To have enough presence of mind to activate the video system on her cell phone to record what we believe is criminal behavior that is about to occur. As far as the first part of your question, that's something we're going to keep close to the vest as part of our investigation. But there's no doubt in our minds that that young lady is a hero.
Along those lines, I know you guys have to keep a lot of close to you, but there's a lot of experience out there. Have you guys ever seen anything like some of the details we're seeing with this case? I mean, is this something that you guys have seen parallel with in other areas?
Well, unfortunately, when you're in the law enforcement business, there are crimes that occur in this nature. As far as the time frame and different things in my experience are unique to my career, but there are a lot of smart people standing behind me that will probably have a different answer. But again, rest assured, we're using our resources to put the person and or persons that murdered Liberty German and Abigail Williams into jail here in Carroll County.
The only thing that I want to add to that is all of you have more questions than we can answer here today without compromising the case. I think we all can agree there's one thing we want to do. We want to capture the person or persons responsible for this crime. We wanted to get this video, to get the audio clip out to you. We wanted to confirm to you where that image came from. We've accomplished those two things here today. We encourage you to play that audio to your audiences frequently over the days to come so that we can develop a tip to that tip line or to the email address that I gave you or to the website information that will be on the State Police website at 10:45. At this time, we're going to conclude the news conference. Thank you all very much for coming here today and to helping to spread the word. Thank you.
Police would refuse to release any specific details about the case, such as how the two girls had been killed, how they were discovered, etc. They would also refuse to say whether or not they were looking for a murder weapon or anything like that. More than 2 years later, those details remain heavily guarded by police. On February 16, 2017, just 2 days after the girls' bodies were discovered in the woods, police conducted a search warrant at a home along West Bicycle Bridge Road, roughly 5 miles away from the crime scene on the other side of Delphi. Police would spend roughly 2 hours inside the home, collecting evidence and taking photos, but ultimately no arrest would be made. Ronald Logan, a Delphi resident whose property the girls' bodies had been found on, was also investigated by police. Ron was an older man who had had some run-ins with the law in the past, but mostly seemed to have an issue with alcohol, not any violent crime. At the time of the murder, Logan had owned that property for more than 50 years, and he was questioned by police several times over the next several weeks. It was discovered that Ron, who had a suspended license, had driven a load of garbage to a nearby dump on the day that the girls were murdered. To some investigators, this was a bizarre coincidence, and the next month, a search was conducted on Logan's property. However, police considered this search a, quote, normal course of the investigation, and Logan was subsequently cleared of any potential involvement. It seems like police never really considered him a viable suspect. Later, Ronald Logan would speak to journalists about the property he owned, which was hard to traverse. He described it as a heavily wooded area often full of hunters and fishermen, who often had difficulty walking anywhere of great distance with equipment, due to the inclines and jagged drop-offs. Describing the distance between his property and the Monon High Bridge, Logan stated, quote, for them to get from there to all the way here with that rough territory they had to walk, you couldn't carry them in a million years or drag them or drop them off. They had to walk. Police continued searching for details in the time frame that this crime had happened. In particular, they were looking for anyone that had been at or around the Monon High Bridge between 2:30 and 5:30 p.m. on February 13th. Anyone that had been in the vicinity was a suspect to police, and them coming forward to provide information could only help clear up their potential involvement, and help decipher whether or not they had potentially encountered either the girls or their killer. A rumored encounter was reported by an eyewitness the day after the murders, in an incident that I can only describe as bizarre. I will preempt this encounter by again stating that this is a rumor, but allegedly, there was a woman near the region of the crime who encountered a young man in a truck near one of the Monon High Bridge trailheads. She claims that this young man's vehicle was broken down, and he refused to make eye contact with her. When she approached, offering help, the young man told her that he was waiting for his dad to pick him up. The witness then left, but reportedly told her husband about the strange encounter later that evening. The following day, after she learned about the two murdered girls, not too far away from where she had been, she reported the incident to police. Again, that entire story is heavily rumored to have been reported by a Delphi local, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think that it's a rumor that is intriguing enough to mention. Another lightning rod for speculation was a meat processing plant, which is roughly 2.5 miles away from the Monon High Bridge. This meat processing plant employs hundreds, if not thousands, of young men that may or may not live in Delphi, but end up becoming familiar with the region for work. Several of the individuals that work here because, while the job is emotionally draining and at times traumatic, it's still a job. Some of those that are employed at the meat processing plant don't exactly have a lot of options, and some are otherwise unemployable. I only mention this plant because, roughly 1 week after the murders, on February 22nd, a bomb threat was called into the building. This resulted in a police raid of the plant, and police were photographed taking away several pieces of evidence, including a pair of boots, which many think may have had some correlation to the ongoing murder investigation. Within days, police called the bomb threat and the subsequent raid, quote, totally unrelated to the homicide investigation, but that did not stop those in the region, and those following the case nationwide, from speculating endlessly. In the wake of this terrible crime, the region of Delphi began to show a tremendous amount of support for the family of the two girls. Not only did the town come together to raise awareness for this case, but they all began participating in fundraising efforts for the expenses the family would have to bear, memorial services, funerals, etc., as well as helping start and contribute to a reward fund. The reward fund, which was originally announced as $41,000 in February, soon blossomed to more than $200,000. This was due in part to major contributions from Indianapolis Colts owner Jim Irsay and retired Colts punter turned entertainer Pat McAfee, as well as numerous fundraising and crowdfunding efforts from the region. On February 18th, 2017, the first Saturday after the murder of Libby and Abby, a public memorial service was held at the girls' school, which was attended by thousands of people that had all gathered to say goodbye to the two girls. Earlier in the day, a private ceremony had been attended by the girls' friends and family. The loved ones of Abigail Williams and Liberty German would struggle to move on after this tragic loss. Each of them played such a vital role in their families, and in such a small town, their faces were plastered almost everywhere. It was hard to go anywhere without their loved ones being constantly reminded of their loss in some way. Abby's grandmother, Diane Erskine, later told Inside Edition, quote, "It's like I had open heart surgery, but they never used any anesthetic and they say, 'I'm sorry, you're just gonna have to live this way, with part of your heart missing the rest of your life.'" Most of the two girls' families would remain quiet for a prolonged period of time, letting the police handle the case both publicly and behind the scenes. However, later in 2017, several family members would appear on an episode of Dr. Phil, where they tried to rekindle some public interest in the investigation. Mike Patty, Liberty's grandfather, said on this broadcast, quote, "Somebody knows something. Nobody lives in total isolation in today's world, and I'm asking that person, please help us out." Anna Williams, Abigail's mother, who had lost her only child in this senseless act of violence, seemed to express a sentiment of trepidation over the still unsolved nature of this case. Quote, "My fear is that we could be here 10 years from now, and we won't know what happened or why." The investigation to find the killer of Liberty German and Abigail Williams quickly became a joint venture between Indiana State Police and the Carroll County Sheriff's Department, who also had help from local Delphi police. Soon, though, these officials began reaching out to other state and federal agencies, quickly obtaining the help of the FBI. Within a year or so, they had even ensnared the help of both Tennessee and Georgia state agencies, expanding the scope of their search and revitalizing certain aspects. When the FBI became involved, in the earliest days of the investigation, they brought with them behavioral analysts who helped create a rough outline of a suspect. According to the FBI, this killer was someone who had likely changed behaviors on or around February 13th, 2017. Greg Massa, the FBI's assistant special agent in charge, acted as the FBI spokesperson early on in the investigation. At the February 22nd press conference, he spoke about the behaviors and actions the killers might have expressed in the days after the crime.
To the members of the community, when I met with our behavioral analysis unit and their expertise and their experience, it is oftentimes even unwitting that a member of the community may have information that is germane to this investigation. And I'd like the community to go back 9 days and go back to the afternoon of February 13th, Monday, February 13th, and just think if you had an interaction with an individual who inexplicably canceled an appointment that you had together, or an individual called into work sick and canceled an important appointment or a social engagement, and at the time gave what would have been a plausible explanation. My cell phone broke, or I had a flat tire on my car. But in retrospect, that excuse no longer holds water. That may be important. Likely so are behavioral indicators that this individual may have exhibited since the afternoon of May 13th. Did this individual travel unexpectedly? Did they change their appearance? Did they shave their beard, cut their hair, change the color of their hair? The superintendent mentioned the clothes that this individual was wearing in the photo. Did they change the way they dress? Did their behavior change? Did their sleep pattern is different now? Did they start abusing drugs or alcohol, whereas they would not have? Have they been anxious, nervous, irritable? Have they followed this case and what the media is putting out with a sense that is not normal? Have they had ongoing discussions regarding their whereabouts on that afternoon or thereafter?
One of the earliest theories in this case is the belief that the murders of Abby and Libby might be related to a similar crime that had unfolded roughly 5 years prior. On July 13th, 2012, a pair of cousins went missing in Evansdale, Iowa, about 400 miles northwest of Delphi. The cousins were 10-year-old Lyric Cook Morrissey and 8-year-old Elizabeth Collins, who went missing while riding their bikes in downtown Evansdale. Their bikes were eventually found at a park nearby, but they were not. A massive search ensued, and eventually, the bodies of the two girls were found in a heavily wooded area roughly 20 miles away from where they had disappeared. By the time their bodies were discovered, the case had long grown cold. I explored that story on this podcast just a few weeks ago, and went into detail about the various suspects that were investigated by police and theorized about in the media, none of whom seemed to remain suspects or persons of interest. From the earliest days of the Delphi investigation, it has been tentatively linked to the Evansdale case, as the stories seem to parallel one another. Both cases feature two young girls who were abducted at the same time, in broad daylight, and had their bodies dumped in rural areas nearby. Both cases unfolded in the Midwest, and the bodies were disposed of in heavily wooded areas frequented by hunters. In the case of Lyric Cook and Elizabeth Collins, their bodies were actually discovered by hunters, and in both cases, the specific details of the murders, such as the cause of death, the state of the remains, etc., would be kept private. The police handling the separate cases have kept many details guarded and refused to budge on specifics. In addition, there are a number of other similarities. Both crimes took place on the 13th of the month. Both disappearances happened in the early afternoon. In both cases, family members were seemingly ruled out as suspects, meaning that a strange individual, who was likely previously unknown to the victims, had been the one to abduct and kill both girls. That in itself is a detail that is very rare, according to both the FBI and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, who state that most abductions happen via family member or family friend. The FBI has also stated that these kind of crimes, double abductions in the middle of the day, are incredibly rare. In fact, between 1974 and 2012, the FBI had recorded only 15 of these incidents, meaning that the likelihood of two similar abduction murders taking place in the same geographic region, just a handful of years apart, has to be very small. especially if the two cases are unrelated. Because what are the odds that two similar killers happen to live within 500 miles of one another? Investigators in charge of these two cases have publicly stated that they've already compared notes, but due to details that have yet to be publicly released, they do not believe the two cases are related. We can only guess at what this may mean. Different causes of death, potential DNA evidence, etc. But these vague statements by police seem to indicate that there is no connection. In September of 2017, more than half a year after the murders of Abby and Libby, a man was arrested in Woodland Park, Colorado. The man had been threatening people with a hatchet on a hiking trail, shortly after a bicyclist had been shot dead on the same trail. Following his arrest, it was learned that this man, 31-year-old Daniel J. Nations, was a registered sex offender from Indiana that had been driving around with expired Indiana license plates. He also happened to be homeless, having moved away from Greenwood, Indiana in May of 2017, just months after the Delphi murders. Of course, these circumstances seemed odd to police, who immediately began to suspect that this man's story might be worth pursuing. They began to explore the man as a possible person of interest in the ongoing Delphi investigation, and soon, El Paso County Sheriff's officials, who had apprehended the man in their Colorado jurisdiction, declared that there were quote-unquote many similarities between Nations and the still unidentified killer from Indiana. Nations had been forced to register as a sex offender because of several criminal acts, including a 2016 incident where he had been discovered masturbating in a woman's restroom while peeping on women in other stalls. This had followed a similar incident from 2007, which had seemingly kicked off his criminal career. He had since had several run-ins with law enforcement, including some drug offenses, and also had a history of domestic violence. In 2016, Nations had been convicted of domestic violence in Morgan County, Indiana. His wife, Caitlin Nations, later admitted to reporters that her husband had an issue with anger, which really began to manifest itself in January of 2017, 1 month before the Delphi murders. That was when he had lost his only remaining family member, his brother, to violent crime. When asked about whether or not he was capable of killing someone, Caitlin responded, quote, "I don't really know, but he scares the heck out of me." Caitlin also admitted that Daniel looked remarkably like the composite image released by police in June of 2017, but hesitated on whether or not she thought he was responsible. She told reporters with the publication The Gazette that Daniel lived more than an hour away from the Delphi crime scene, and he did not have a vehicle of his own to get there. Additionally, while he may have looked like the composite image released by police, he did not really look like the image of the figure captured on Libby's cell phone. She also said that he did not own the clothing owned by this supposed killer. Speaking to reporters from The Gazette, Caitlin stated, quote, "I can't tell if that is him or not, but the one thing I'm not going to buckle on, he did not have that jacket." Following his arrest for threatening hikers with a hatchet in Colorado, the now 32-year-old Daniel Nations was sentenced to 3 years probation. However, he would remain in police custody due to an outstanding warrant from Johnson County, Indiana. On January 24th, 2018, he was transferred to Indiana custody for failing to register as a sex offender. A few weeks later, in February of 2018, investigators handling the Delphi investigation would state that Daniel Nations was no longer considered an active person of interest. They would not state why exactly, but several possibilities have been floated online for those following the case, most of which seem to rule out Nations as a suspect. It has been reported that Daniel Nations has a very distinct walk, described as a limp, and he seems to be much smaller than the supposed killer, to the tune of being 15 to 25 pounds lighter. He also has a southern drawl, which is very unlike the audio recording released to the public. Additionally, he may have also had an alibi for the day of the murders, as well as having a lack of reliable transportation to and from the crime scene, which would make placing him at the location a near impossibility. As of this moment, it is not believed that Daniel Nations is an active suspect in this case, despite so many of the early details seeming to match up. It has been stated that Nations has given his DNA to investigators in the Delphi case, and when speaking to reporters from the Gazette, Daniel Nations later stated, quote, "I feel like a victim in this situation. I just want people to know the truth, that I am not a monster. John Miller was a 59-year-old that lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana, roughly 100 miles southwest of Delphi. Described as an angry and secluded old man by his neighbors, Miller was known mostly for his gruff demeanor. In July of 2018, more than a year after the Delphi murders, Miller was arrested in a 30-year-old cold case. The case itself was the 1988 murder of April Tinsley, which played out back in 1988, more than 3 decades prior. Tinsley, an 8-year-old girl, had gone missing while out playing with her friends. Days later, her body was discovered, having been strangled and sexually assaulted, and the killer had left behind several clues taunting the police, as well as the loved ones of 8-year-old April. The case had gone cold many years prior, but advancements in DNA technology allowed investigators to narrow down their suspect pool. This eventually led them straight to 59-year-old John Miller, who still lived in the region all these years later. Following his arrest, Miller confessed to the crime to investigators, and later pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 80 years in prison, where he is undoubtedly going to rot until his death. In the months since his arrest and guilty plea, Miller has become a popular suspect for web sleuths and followers of the Delphi case, as he lived less than 2 hours away from the crime scene, and seems to have had the motivation to commit similarly heinous crimes. In fact, in a taunt to police back in 1988, he had written in crayon that he would kill again. Police have been intentionally vague about this potential link, with Indiana State Police Sergeant Kim Riley stating, in response to a question about Miller, quote, "We have 1,000 names out there, and we're still looking at all of them." On November 19th, 2018, in St. Louis, Missouri, a man entered a Catholic supply store. There, he proceeded to sexually assault 2 women, and when a third refused to comply with his demands, she was shot and killed. The description of the culprit was incredibly similar to the man recorded on 14-year-old Libby German's cell phone more than a year and a half prior in Delphi, Indiana, roughly 300 miles away from this Catholic supply store. The man was described as being middle-aged, standing 5'7" to 5'9", and he was wearing a paperboy hat as well as a navy blue Carhartt-styled jacket. The similarities, even down to the clothing, were striking. Within days, police had identified a suspect in this heinous crime, a 53-year-old man named Thomas Bruce. Bruce was a U.S. Navy veteran, an avid advocate for gun rights, and had been a pastor between 2003 and 2007. Since then, he seemed to have fallen on hard times, having filed for bankruptcy in January of 2017, along with his wife. He was unemployed at the time of the sexual assault and shooting, and looked vaguely like the suspect from the unsolved Delphi murders. Roughly 1 week after the shooting in the Catholic supply store, Bruce was arraigned on first-degree murder charges, as well as additional charges of sodomy, armed criminal action, burglary, and tampering with evidence. On December 4th, 2018, he was officially charged with 17 felony counts, and was even later implicated in another crime in a neighboring county. Bruce also stands accused of invading the home of a 77-year-old woman in Jefferson County, Missouri, in September of 2018, and then assaulting, sexually assaulting, and robbing her. He has since been charged in that crime as well. Because of the ongoing legal proceedings, Thomas Bruce has not been convicted on any of these crimes as of yet. He has entered a plea of not guilty for the charges leveled against him, and I want you all to keep that in mind. As of this episode's recording, Bruce is still innocent of all of these crimes. His guilt has not been proven, and he remains in custody awaiting trial. However, if Bruce is found guilty of these crimes, he could face the death penalty. Based on the charges filed against him, and the seemingly overwhelming physical evidence connecting him to these crimes, it is easy to make assumptions about Thomas Bruce. Many online have tried to connect him to the Delphi murders, but I think such an association is impossible to make, at least so far. I will eagerly be keeping up on Bruce's trial dates, and should anything come to light in the future, I will undoubtedly keep you all informed. As of this moment though, Bruce has not been convicted of anything, and police have yet to speak publicly about any possible connections between him and the Delphi crime. On January 8th, 2019, a 46-year-old named Charles Eldridge was arrested in Union City, Indiana. about 2 hours southeast of Delphi. Eldridge, who bears a striking resemblance to the original sketch released by investigators in the Delphi murders, was held without bond. He had allegedly arranged to meet up with a teenage girl who, unbeknownst to him, was a police officer. Following his arrest, Eldridge then apparently admitted to engaging in sex acts with a different child under the age of 13 on multiple occasions. Once he was in custody, the mugshot of Charles Eldridge went viral, and people all over the world began to compare it to the composite image released by Indiana State Police in June of 2017. The resemblance was uncanny, so much so that his arrest really set off alarm bells for those that had been closely following the Delphi case. After his arrest in Union City, Randolph County officials shared Eldridge's information with the FBI, informing them that a link to Delphi might be possible. However, after this disclosure, they cautioned the public to refrain from making any more inflammatory public guesses. Quote, outside of the person resembling the sketch, there is currently zero evidence that ties him to this case, and he is not a suspect in the case. Although we understand that people are trying to help the investigation, by doing this with zero evidence other than a mere appearance, it can also hurt or hinder an investigation. Despite exhibiting some odd behaviors on his social media accounts, and looking like a composite image, there is currently nothing connecting Charles Eldridge to the murders of Abigail Williams or Liberty German. He is still awaiting trial for his child molestation charges, and there has been no further information released about him in a couple of months. Trying to deter people from making further accusations, and accusing people of being a child killer based on a hunch, Captain Dave Burston of the Indiana State Police told the public, quote, I can promise you this. When an arrest is made of a suspect identified as the alleged perpetrator of the Delphi murders, rest assured, we will let everyone know. On April 22nd, 2019, potentially just days ago depending on when you listen to this episode, the investigators handling the Delphi double murder announced that they were changing course. A few days before, they announced that they were going to be moving the case in a quote-unquote new direction, and were expected to reveal significant news at a press conference. The family members of Abby and Libby, who were unaware of the information that would be shared, met with police just a short time before the press conference on Monday, April 22nd. The press conference was put together by Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter, who had been publicly involved with the case for more than 2 years now. At the Canal Center in Delphi, Indiana, Carter spoke to an assembly of loved ones, reporters, and even members of the public that were allowed to attend. Some believe that this might have been an invitation for the killer himself to attend, but I'll let you be the judge on that.
The Delphi community, how grateful I am. You inspire people that you don't even understand, and you don't even understand why. Information is being released today is the result of literally thousands and thousands of hours of extraordinary investigative efforts by Delphi, Carroll County, the FBI, the Indiana State Police, and countless other agencies. This community surrounded us some 26 months ago, and you did everything you could to support us, but most importantly, you surrounded the family of these two little girls. Gosh, I'll never forget it. After you hear what we're going to release today, I'm going to ask for your continued support, your continued understanding, your empathy and compassion as we move forward to find out who did this, and we will. We're seeking the public's help to identify the driver of a vehicle that was parked at the old CPS DCS welfare building in the city of Delphi that was abandoned on the east side of County Road 300 North next to the Hoosier Heartland Highway between the hours of noon to 5 on February 14th, 2017. If you were parked there or know who was parked there, please contact the officers at the command post at the Delphi City building. We are releasing additional portions of the audio recording from that day. Please keep in mind, the person talking is one person.
and is the person on the bridge with the girls. This is not two different people speaking. Please listen to it very, very carefully. We are also releasing video recovered from Libby's phone. This video has never before been previously released. The video shows a suspect walking on the bridge. When you see the video, watch the person's mannerisms as they walk. Watch the mannerisms as he walks. Do you recognize the mannerisms as being someone that you might know? Remember, he is walking on the former railroad bridge. Because of the deteriorated condition of the bridge, the suspect is not walking naturally due to the spacing between the ties. During the course of this investigation, we have concluded the first sketch released will become secondary as of today. The result of the new information and intelligence over time leads us to believe the sketch, which you will see shortly, is the person responsible for the murders of these two little girls. We also believe this person is from Delphi, currently or has previously lived here, visits Delphi on a regular basis, or works here. We believe this person is currently between the age range of 18 and 40, but might appear younger than his true age. Directly to the killer, who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We likely have interviewed you or someone close to you. We know that this is about power to you, and you want to know what we know. And one day, you will. A question to you. What will those closest to you think of when they find out that you brutally murdered two little girls? Two children. Only a coward would do such a thing. We are confident that you have told someone what you have done. Or at the very least, they know because of how different you are since the murders. We try so hard to understand how a person could do something like this to two children. I recently watched a movie called The Shack. And there's also a book that talks so well about evil, about death, and about eternity. To the murderer, I believe you have just a little bit of a conscience left. And I can assure you that how you left them in that woods is not what they're experiencing today. To the family, I hope that you all will give them some time, because we're going to be asking that there's no media inquiry or no media response for at least the next 2 weeks, and I hope you understand why. The family found out about this information this morning. I just want the family to know that When I take my last breath on this earth, I'll be thinking of them. There's going to be a tremendous amount of questions. I know that. Never in my career have I stood in front of something like this. Please be patient with us, please. We're just beginning. We are just now beginning. And I can tell you on behalf of the sheriff and the police chief, so many other partners that have stood with us over this period of time, that we will not stop.
As you just heard, this press conference seemed to upend or update most of the information that had been previously released by investigators. The Indiana State Police had completely overhauled their suspects' information, starting with an updated composite sketch, which is remarkably different from the original composite released in June of 2017. This sketch features an individual with a narrow nose, thin lips, no facial hair, thick curly-looking hair, and a stronger, more pronounced jaw, which may or may not suggest an underbite. The individual in this sketch is also noticeably younger than the original. Indiana State Police claim that this sketch, quote, is representative of the face of the person captured in the video on Liberty German's cell phone as he was walking on the High Bridge. Unfortunately, this newly released sketch is also much more vague, looking like potentially thousands of young men in the region. The artist that drew this sketch, ISP Master Trooper Taylor Bryant, stated that this sketch was based on a description given to him by an eyewitness. No input was given from other authorities, and it was not based on any extraneous information, as was the case in the original sketch. Additionally, it was learned that this sketch had been made just days after the girls' bodies were found, back on February 17th, 2017, but was just now being released. The original composite sketch, according to Indiana State Police Sergeant Kim Riley, is, quote-unquote, not presently a person of interest in this investigation. Rather, it seems to have been a POI that police were looking for, but had since been identified and cleared of any wrongdoing. With the release of this new sketch, police were updating the supposed age of the killer. They no longer believed that he was undoubtedly middle-aged, but rather was somewhere between 18 and 40 years old. This is quite the vague window, but investigators believe that the killer might look much younger than he actually is. Perhaps he's someone that has a youthful appearance. For the first time, police publicly stated that the killer was likely familiar with Delphi itself, meaning that they do not believe that this killer was an outsider. This was probably someone that lived or worked in Delphi, or regularly visited for some other reason. Police would also reveal a fragment of video, which shows this unknown individual walking on the High Bridge. This video shows that the killer has a weird gait to his step, but that could be chalked up to the bridge itself, which features some pretty big gaps between the ties, and can be hard to walk on. Nonetheless, this image showed the killer in motion for the very first time, which was a revelation to many. Additionally, police released a slightly longer audio clip of the killer speaking, which I will play for you now. You'll hear the original clip of the man telling the girls, down the hill, which is preceded by him saying the word, guys. Give it a listen.
Guys. Down the hill. Guys. Down the hill. Guys. Down the hill.
In addition to the new composite image and updated media files, investigators also announced that they were seeking information about a car seen on a rural road near Delphi on the day of the murders. This car had apparently been parked on County Road 300 North, near the entrance to the Bridge Trail, close to the Hoosier Heartland Highway. It was there at some point between noon and 5 p.m. on Monday, February 13th, 2017, and had been parked outside the old CPS/DCS/welfare building, which, at the time, was abandoned. That building has since been demolished and is no longer standing. Police did not reveal any details about this vehicle, such as its make, model, or color, only that they were looking to speak to its owner. It is believed that they do know the specific details of this vehicle, but want to filter out solid leads. To many, this lead about the vehicle harkened back to some of the local rumors about a woman encountering a young man in a truck near the crime scene. Many think that this might explain the shift in direction for the investigation, and give us a clue of what's to come. In a written statement directed at this unknown killer, which was released later in the day, ISP Superintendent Doug Carter wrote, quote, "We have a witness. You made mistakes. We are coming for you, and there's no place for a heartless coward like you to hide that gets his thrill from killing little girls." The investigation into the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German is ongoing. The case is continuously being investigated by the FBI, the Indiana State Police, Carroll County Sheriff's officials, and many more. In 2018, investigators reached out to officials with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the GBI, as well as other FBI field offices to look over their case file with a fresh set of eyes. Many believe that this might have eventually led to the recent overhaul, and now, with more than one state agency looking over the case, with cooperation from federal investigators, many believe that the killer's capture is imminent. The loved ones of Abby and Libby continue to speak to the press and raise awareness for the investigation, having started an initiative in 2017 to install orange light bulbs all throughout Indiana. This not only honors the slain girls, but reminds the public that their killer remains at large, and until he is captured, none can rest easy, not with him still out there. In February of this year, the 2-year anniversary of this crime came and went, and with it came a renewed sense of optimism that the killer, of whom so many details are public knowledge, will be brought to justice. The loved ones of the 2 girls continue to hope that the public interest will lead to more tips being received by law enforcement, and that hopefully one will be the tip that helps nail this bastard. Speaking to the Lafayette Journal and Courier, Libby's grandfather Mike Patty stated, quote, "We've been saying it all along. Someone knows something. Someone's going to talk. Someone's going to think, maybe this one thing I saw might mean something, and maybe that's the one thing that gets this guy." As far as the active state of the investigation goes, you already know everything that I know. Police have rightfully withheld most of their evidence, and have even refused to state whether or not they have the culprit's DNA. It is widely believed that they do, but that it might only be a partial sample, which could be enough to eliminate suspects, but perhaps not enough to find him through DNA databases. They have accepted DNA from prior suspects and other persons of interest, and seem to be ruling out individuals through forensic testing. Furthermore, the most recent press conference seemed pretty brazen to many, with ISP Superintendent Doug Carter openly calling the culprit a coward, and making vague comments about his religious beliefs. Some believe that this might have either been a Hail Mary, or a play at the killer's moral core, either goading him to expose himself or confess. Several criminologists have weighed in over the past couple of weeks, and they believe that investigators are narrowing in on their killer. If so, the clock is ticking on this individual's freedom. The reward fund, which continues to stand today, is currently at $225,000. That is for any information that may lead to an arrest, so if you may know something, don't be afraid to reach out. You can help solve a crime and make yourself rich in the process. It's a win-win. If you do have any information, or think you might know something, you are encouraged to reach out. You can call the tip line by dialing 844-459-5786. Once again, that's 844-459-5786. And you can anonymously email any tips to abbyandlibbytip@cacoShrf.com. Once again, that's ABBYANDLIBBYTIP@CACOSHRF.com. Until further notice, the stories of Liberty German and Abigail Williams remain unresolved.
Hey, Michael, just calling to wish you hey, congratulations on 100 episodes. Podcast has been fantastic. I can go on a limb and say I'm not going on a limb when I say this is the best podcast for true crime out there. I know it's my favorite. What a long, strange journey it's been, and here's to another 100 episodes.
I would like to say thank you to that caller, Ben, for leaving such an awesome voicemail. This is indeed the 100th full-length episode of Unresolved, a milestone that I never thought possible almost 4 years ago when I started this show on a whim. I honestly cannot believe that I've made it this far, and I could not have done it without people out there listening. So, thank you for continuing to care about what I have to say. Without you, I'd just be a weirdo talking into a microphone. I mean, I am, but at least there's someone at the other end. If you're interested in learning more about the podcast, make sure to look up Unresolved on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, whichever you may use. And you could send in any emails to michael@unresolved.me. That's Micheal @unresolved.me. If you want to be like the awesome listener Ben and leave a voicemail or a text, you could do that by dialing 831-200-3550. If you want to read along with a transcript of this episode, or you want to find any of my sources or links to the music used, anything like that, make sure to check out the podcast website at unresolved.me. Once again, that's unresolved.me. There, you could also find links to the podcast store and our Patreon at the top of the page. I just recently upgraded the podcast store, so there is an official Unresolved store now. You could find that at the top of the website. Just click on the store button, or you could head there directly by heading to unresolved.threadless.com. I've got some pretty basic designs up there so far, but I hope to have some pretty cool stuff up there soon, including some retro Unsolved Mysteries inspired stuff. That's pretty exciting in my opinion. The more Robert Stack, the better. You can also help support the show by heading to patreon.com/unresolvedpod and becoming a patron. There are currently 4 different tiers for perks, which give you access to commercial-free episodes, early access, bonus mini-episodes, episodes to my new exclusive podcast, Resolved, and much more. You can also become a producer for the show, and I'd like to take a minute to thank those producers right now, actually. Ben Krokum, Evan White, Maggy James, Matthew Brock, Lauren Harris, Quil Carter, Roberta Janson, Damion Moore, Amy Hampton Miller, Astrid Kneier, sorry, my German's not that great, Astrid, but I'm sure you already know that. Timothy Stratton, Peggy Belarde, Laura Hannan, Scott Meesey, Stephen Wilson, Sara Willemsen, and Katherine Vatalaro. Sorry if I butchered any of your names, but thank you all so goddamn much. Your support means the world to me, and y'all are truly the best listeners a guy could have. And that really goes out to the rest of you listening as well. I've now done 100 of these bad boys, and I cannot wait for the next 100. Until next time, everyone, stay safe, and I will talk to you later.